My name is Cindy, and I was 32 years old when everything in my family changed forever. My parents had financially supported my sister's business, and then tried to burden me with their debt. Suddenly, they wanted to reconnect with my daughter after years of distance. A shocking truth I had uncovered was about to change everything completely. For almost 8 years, I had maintained a distant relationship with my parents. Now, they were trying to re-enter my life without warning, and I was completely uncertain how to respond. To understand my journey, you need to know where I came from and the family dynamics that shaped me. I grew up in a small town in Ohio as the eldest child, with my sister Morgan born when I was just 2 years old. Morgan was what my parents called the golden child, a term that would echo painfully throughout my childhood. She was naturally charming, athletic, outgoing, with a beauty that seemed to effortlessly capture everyone's attention. In stark contrast, I was shy and intensely focused on my studies, often feeling invisible in my own family. My father, especially, showed Morgan more interest than he ever showed me. A former high school football star, he was unable to let go of his glory days and seemed to live vicariously through my sister's potential. I would watch him spend hours in the backyard, meticulously teaching Morgan perfect spiral passes, his eyes gleaming with a pride he never seemed to direct at me. While he coached her, I would sit on the porch, losing myself in books, feeling like an afterthought in my own family. My mother wasn't as overtly biased, but she too favored Morgan in her own subtle ways. She would proudly display Morgan's paintings on the refrigerator, while my stray day report cards would receive a perfunctory, "Good job, Cindy," without real enthusiasm. When I was 10, I won first place in the science fair, with a project on renewable energy. I was so excited to show my parents, imagining their pride and support. But they were so busy celebrating Morgan joining football that they were completely unaware of my accomplishment. As I grew older, this preferential treatment became even more pronounced. I dedicated myself to my studies, joining debate and math clubs, with a clear goal of attending a top university to become a doctor. Morgan, meanwhile, naturally shone with her charm and athletic abilities. She was the star quarterback, constantly surrounded by friends, going to parties and dates almost every night. The night of my high school graduation is forever etched in my memory. I had spent weeks preparing my valedictorian speech, pouring my heart and soul into every word. Standing on that stage, I scanned the audience looking for my family's support. My father was there, but completely absorbed in taking photos of Morgan. She was laughing in the back, chatting with her friends. My mother gave me a fleeting glance, but her attention was primarily focused on my sister. I had been accepted to a prestigious university, but I still felt overshadowed by Morgan's presence. When I received my acceptance letter, I was initially thrilled, but that joy quickly dissolved. My parents sat me down and told me they couldn't financially support me. Despite believing they had savings, they claimed unexpected expenses had put them in a difficult financial situation. I was shocked, but I was also determined. To pay for my college expenses, I took out student loans and worked multiple jobs. It was incredibly challenging, but I was proud of everything I accomplished on my own. I worked as a tutor and library assistant, and during summers, I took night shifts at 24-hour stores. There were times I could barely keep my eyes open during classes. I was so exhausted, but I somehow managed to push through. In contrast, Morgan decided college wasn't for her. She worked at a local auto repair shop during the day and spent her nights at bars and parties. My parents didn't seem particularly concerned about her lifestyle. They would just laugh and say, "That's Morgan, enjoying life in the moment." During my final year of college, I discovered a shocking truth. Morgan suddenly decided to open her own auto repair shop, and my parents provided her with full initial funding. It was the same money they had claimed they couldn't use for my tuition. I was struggling with mounting student loans, often having to choose between buying textbooks or having a decent meal. Meanwhile, my parents had been secretly saving this money specifically for Morgan. When I confronted them about this, they defended their decision. Their reasoning was that Morgan didn't have a college degree and needed the money. They casually told me, "You're smart. You'll make good money as a doctor, so it's not a problem for you." The massive debt and stress I was experiencing meant nothing to them. This was my turning point. After graduating, I continued my medical studies and almost completely cut off contact with my family. Even on important holidays, when we did meet, our conversations were brief and superficial. In my second year of medical school, I vowed to succeed without any help from my parents. I focused entirely on my studies. It was during this time that I met Christopher. He was a law school student, thoughtful and kind. With him, I finally felt truly understood and valued. We began dating, and he became my greatest support. He always listened to my family issues and never criticized my decision to distance myself from my parents. Christopher and I got married and moved to Seattle, putting distance between ourselves and my family's painful past. 2 years ago, we welcomed our daughter Lily, starting a new chapter of parenthood. When I look at Lily, I'm reminded of my own childhood. I silently promised myself that she would always feel loved and supported, no matter what path she chooses. Currently, I'm successful in my career as an ophthalmologist. Christopher is also achieving great results in his sales position. Lily is a vibrant 2-year-old who brings us joy every single day. Our life is fulfilling, but the impact of my family's past has not been fully overcome. A few weeks ago, I had an anxious phone conversation with my mother that broke our long silence. She was crying on the phone. Morgan's business had failed, and she had moved back in with my parents. She had made poor decisions, accumulated debt, and was unemployed. Ultimately, my parents were forced to mortgage their house to support her. Suddenly, they wanted to reconnect and meet their granddaughter. My father said, "I'm proud of what you've accomplished. And I want to make amends." Somewhere deep inside, I wanted to be thankful for how they raised me. After all, they were my parents, and being estranged made me feel lonely. I worried about keeping Lily away from her grandparents, but anger and pain were rising from another angle. Christopher advised me to listen to their story, prioritizing my safety and ensuring I wouldn't be hurt again. He offered to be my support and buffer when talking to my parents. I was torn between a desperate desire for family and the need to protect myself from further pain. I feared letting my parents back into my life. What if they hurt me again or tried to use me as a financial safety net now that Morgan had failed? Looking at Lily, I worried about how my past might affect her future. Ultimately, I decided to meet my parents and suggested a quiet cafe near my workplace. I planned to initially meet them alone, hear their story, and then potentially introduce them to my family. In the days leading up to our meeting, I was incredibly nervous. I was on edge, snapping at Christopher over small things, and barely slept the night before. After Lily went to bed, I spent time in her room, studying her peaceful sleeping face, questioning my decision. On the morning of our meeting, I arrived at the cafe early, choosing a discreet corner table. My parents had always been late to school events, debate competitions, science fairs, and graduations. This was usually because of Morgan. But this time, surprisingly, they arrived early. Seeing them at the cafe entrance, I noticed they looked more tired. My mother's hair was completely white, my father's thinning. Their faces were fuller than I remembered, and we just stared at each other. As soon as my mother entered the cafe, she embraced me. The hug was surprisingly strong, leaving me confused but feeling a slight warmth of affection. I invited them to sit and decided to let them speak first. My mother dominated the conversation, acknowledging past unfairness and beginning to apologize. My father expressed pride in my achievements and regretted not supporting me more. Then, a shocking revelation emerged. One reason they wanted to contact me was related to Morgan's situation. Her business failure wasn't just a simple bankruptcy, but involved suspicious dealings and gambling debts. They had been forced to sell their vacation home and take a second mortgage to support her. As they spoke, many memories resurfaced. Before college, I had once asked to borrow the vacation home for a week during summer. They had refused, saying it was currently in use. Later, I discovered Morgan and her friends had stayed there for an entire month. After listening quietly to their entire story, I took a deep breath and spoke frankly. I pointed out how they had always prioritized Morgan's whims and overlooked my efforts. I asked why they hadn't supported me more, describing the nights I had cried myself to sleep while studying. I shared how I had to sell the laptop my grandmother gave me as a graduation gift just to afford textbooks. I described those exhausting nights returning home smelling like grease from the cafeteria, while my parents were supporting Morgan's luxurious lifestyle. My father tried to justify their actions, but I stopped him. I reminded him that while he was watching Morgan's football games, my debate team had won the state championship. I accepted their apologies, but made it clear that the deep wounds of past neglect wouldn't heal easily. If they wanted to repair our relationship, they would need to respect the conditions I set, and this would take time and effort. I touched on Morgan's current situation, making it absolutely clear that while I sympathized with her, I had no intention of being her safety net or trying to win her attention. I told them that my life, and now my husband and daughter, were my priority. Throughout our conversation, pain and regret flickered across my parents' faces. My mother quietly shed tears, and my father suddenly looked aged by our discussion. I felt a twinge of guilt for causing them pain, but also a sense of relief from speaking the truth. Our conversation ended with complex emotions, and we agreed to proceed cautiously. I told them we could occasionally talk on the phone, but had no plans for in-person meetings or introducing Lily yet. I explained that understanding would take time and emphasized the importance of respecting the boundaries I had set. When I left the cafe, I was filled with a mixture of sadness and relief. It wasn't the warm reconciliation I might have hoped for, but an honest conversation was necessary. I sat in my car, lost in thought. When I got home, Christopher was waiting and embraced me the moment he saw me. We sat on the living room sofa, and I shared the day's events. He listened without criticism, comforting and supporting me that night. When Christopher asked how I was feeling in bed, I answered, "I'm not sure." I felt like a long-carried burden had been lifted, but also the pain of old wounds resurfacing. I was trying to make sense of everything, feeling like I'd taken a step toward healing. But the future remained unclear. I understood there were still many challenges and difficulties to overcome. Yet, I felt that after all this time, rebuilding a connection with my parents might be possible. A month had passed since our reunion. I'd had a few phone calls, but they were short and somewhat awkward. My mother seemed to be trying very hard, sometimes almost too hard. She was contacting me more frequently than I wanted, always asking about Lily. I had to set clear boundaries with her. I explained that to be Lily's grandmother, she would need to meet specific conditions. Last week, she called wanting to talk for 20 minutes about toys she'd bought for Lily. I interrupted her, pointing out that it was inappropriate to give gifts when she hadn't even met Lily yet. My mother seemed hurt by my words, but I didn't waver from my position. My conversations with my father were more reserved, and he seemed to be keeping his distance. Our only conversation was tense and uncomfortable. My father was struggling with his pride, finding it difficult to acknowledge years of misunderstandings. During our conversation, he mainly asked about my work, trying to understand the life I had built entirely on my own. But then, an unexpected drama unfolded. My sister Morgan reappeared. About 2 weeks after our family meeting, I received a long email from her. She apologized for her past mistakes and sought my help. She expressed regret for how her actions had ruined my life and manipulated our parents, wishing she could have been a better sister. Reading the email brought back many memories, like the time in high school, when she used my car without permission and had an accident. Back then, my parents had been angry but never blamed Morgan, paying for the repairs instead. As a result, I had to take the bus to school for an entire month. At first, I was deeply moved by Morgan's email. It seemed like a genuine attempt at reconciliation. But as I continued reading, her true intentions became clear. She was actually asking for money. She believed a new business plan selling gourmet hot dogs from a food truck would solve all her problems and was seeking financial assistance from me. I felt a surge of anger. Even after all these years, she still saw me as nothing more than a financial resource. Her business proposal was vague and immature, and I felt she had learned nothing from her past failures. Instead of replying to her email, I contacted our parents. The conversation was incredibly tense. When I asked about Morgan's email, they admitted they had actually encouraged her to reach out to me. They believed the family could reunite once again. In that moment, I lost my composure. I pointed out that their manipulative attempts were exactly why I had decided to raise Lily on my own. I remembered all of Morgan's unforgivable actions, from cheating on tests to being fired for drunk driving in her 20s. I emphasized that I had no intention of funding her project. I told them that the very idea of her turning to me was hurtful, given our history. I said that if this was their way of making amends, they needed to learn much more about respect and boundaries. The phone call ended badly. My mother cried again, my father tried to justify himself, and I was shaking with anger. After calming down, I had a deep conversation with Christopher. He has always been my support, encouraging me when I needed it most. He provided clear insights. At that point, I felt it was best to distance myself from my family. The fragile trust we had begun to build seemed lost. Disappointed and hurt, yet a part of me felt a sense of relief. This incident proved that my instincts had been right. My family truly did not understand the pain they had caused and did not respect the boundaries I had set. It was a harsh reality, but an important one for me. I am focusing on my own family, Christopher and Lily. They are the most precious people to me, and I'm trying to move forward with my life while addressing family issues. I want to ensure that my parents and Morgan don't jeopardize the happiness we've built. Last night, while putting Lily to bed, she asked me to read a book she received as a gift. Reading the story, I realized how different my relationship with her is from my relationship with my parents. I want her to understand the importance of being loved unconditionally. It's not about finding value only in what she can provide. This morning, I sent a brief email to my parents, asking for the time I need. I told them I would contact them when I'm ready. I made it clear that our future relationship depends on their understanding of the distance I require. I also emphasized that they need to treat me as an equal family member, not use me as a means to resolve issues with Morgan. So far, they haven't responded, and I'm unsure how they view this situation. On one hand, I feel a sense of peace, but I'm also worried they might have given up on reconciliation. Currently, I'm experiencing peaceful days. I'm busy with my work at the hospital and recently celebrated progress with my colleagues. I'm focusing on the positive aspects of life and trying not to dwell on the past. Months have passed since my reunion with my parents. During this time, I ignored their calls and messages, concentrating on my work and family. The holiday season was particularly challenging, but necessary to maintain my mental health. About 3 months ago, I received a handwritten letter from my father. Unlike digital communication, the letter reminded me of his familiar handwriting. It brought to mind the notes he used to leave in birthday cards and lunch boxes. Memories from before Morgan's birth resurfaced. The letter was dramatically transformative. His actions were unexpected. In it, he candidly acknowledged his bias towards Morgan, the wounds he had inflicted on me, and the various mistakes he made while attempting reconciliation. He made no excuses, sought nothing, and simply expressed deep remorse and a willingness to make amends. I decided to wait until I was ready to respond. He opened up about confronting himself and how his anxieties had influenced his actions. He admitted that feeling unsuccessful in his professional life had led him to seek self-validation through Morgan's sports achievements. He confessed that while he was proud of my academic accomplishments, he didn't know how to express it. The handwritten letter, more contemplative than ever before, showed he had spent considerable time seriously reflecting. As a result, our conversations increased, sometimes awkward but more honest than before. This marked a new beginning in family communication. He began showing interest in my profession, listening attentively when I shared my daily experiences. His recent support has been incredibly encouraging, providing opportunities to share aspects of our daily lives. Moreover, he has become more open to acknowledging his mistakes and is trying to overcome his deep fear of losing a child. This change demonstrates his growth and represents a significant development in our relationship. As Lily's birthday approached, he asked what gift he should give. Rather than simply giving permission, I suggested enjoying this special moment together through a video call. His smile when Lily opened her present was genuinely heartfelt. The doctor's play set he chose was unique and held profound meaning for all of us. The situation with my mother and Morgan remains complex, but my mother has become more delicate in handling our relationship. I can sense the change through her small actions and gestures. For instance, she occasionally emails me family recipes and old photographs. These connections between past and present are shared without burdening me. Meanwhile, Morgan has begun treatment for gambling addiction and secured a stable job after a long period of instability. She hasn't contacted me directly yet, which might be the best decision for her and our family right now. According to my father, Morgan is actively participating in anonymous gambling addiction meetings and slowly repaying the money she borrowed from our parents. These are positive signs in her recovery process. These events have profoundly changed my perspective on life and my attitude toward family. We cannot change the past, nor can we completely control our family's actions. But I can choose how to react. I've consciously worked to let go of years of anger and resentment. It's not an easy process, and there are days when I feel no progress. However, even when past pain resurfaces, I continue to make an effort to move forward. In overcoming these challenges, I've come to appreciate my family in a new way. Christopher has always been a trustworthy support, present when I need advice or simply want someone to listen. As Lily grows, it becomes increasingly important for her to learn about our family. Last weekend, we enjoyed a picnic at a local park. Watching Christopher push Lily on the swings, I savored a rare moment of quiet recently. Regardless of what happens with my parents or Morgan, I have a family built on love, trust, and mutual respect. We live each day deliberately, neither rushing nor giving up. Christopher and Lily are my priority in life, and I'm cautiously optimistic about potentially bridging some of the gaps with my parents. This journey has been incredibly difficult, but it has also provided many valuable lessons. I've learned much about forgiveness, setting boundaries, and the complexity of family relationships. I feel confident that I'm prepared to handle whatever may come next.